Hey, everybody. Let's get right into it. I want to talk about what's happening with the UAE right now because a lot has happened in a very short window, and I want to connect the dots for you. So, what happened is that over the course of the last couple days, the the UAE announced that their Fujairah oil terminal had been hit by Iranian rockets. You see that headline up on your screen, and this comes in the wake of last week on May 1st, just a few days ago, the UAE officially withdrew from OPEC. Okay, and then we have these Iranian drones hitting Fujairah. We'll talk about Fujairah in a bit. And on the same day, the UAE announced that it had intercepted ballistic missiles, 3 Iranian ballistic missiles. Here, take a look at this story right here that was posted to X. Just in UAE, air defenses are actively engaging suspected Iranian missiles. Iran has struck an empty UAE oil tanker. Okay, so there have been attacks from Iran on the UAE, and this was from yesterday, but it also continued today. The UAE is under attack from Iran. Okay, so we have those two stories. And on the same day that happened, the UAE signed one of the largest military aircraft contracts in Middle East history. Here, take a look at this headline that went under everyone's radar. UAE to get 10 C-390 aircraft, up to 10 more in the future. And this is a Brazilian aircraft. It's a very important aircraft. We're going to learn more about it later in the video. But this is a massive procurement deal of the UAE purchasing this very advanced Brazilian aircraft. So all these things happened in the space of about a week. Again, the OPEC pullout, the missiles incoming from Iran getting attacked. Prime Minister Netanyahu also called the leader of the UAE to condemn the Iranian attacks, and the UAE made it public. They announced that all these leaders were calling to condemn the attack, and they mentioned that Prime Minister Netanyahu called and spoke to the leader of the UAE. And these things are all interconnected. And in this video, what I want to do now is explain how they are all connected. So bear with me here. Here we go. We're going to connect some dots. Let's start with Netanyahu calling, with this announcement by the UAE that Netanyahu had called. Okay, let's take a look at this story in the Times of Israel. They covered it here. Take a look at this headline. UAE says Netanyahu among world leaders who phoned Emirati leader to condemn Iranian attacks. Okay? United Arab Emirates President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan received calls from regional leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, condemning what they described as Iranian attacks on civilians and civilian facilities in the UAE, the state news agency WAM says. The leaders affirmed their country's solidarity with the UAE and support for measures it takes to safeguard its security and stability and ensure the safety of its citizens. And then it says that there was no immediate comment from Netanyahu's office. Okay? So why am I connecting all these things? What do all these different stories have to do with each other? So again, let's start with the Netanyahu call. The fact that Netanyahu called is not in itself surprising. What's surprising and what's significant is that the UAE told the world that Netanyahu called. You see, they didn't have to do that. They chose to. And that choice is actually the key to understanding everything that happened this week. And now let's go ahead and connect the dots. So there's a piece written by my good friend Dan Bermawi. You should be following him on X if you aren't. He's one of the best analysts of the Middle East out there, a former Muslim, grew up in Jordan, now lives in the West. He's now a Christian. And he really always hits the nail on the head. And Dan wrote a piece last week, I think end of April 28th, I think, about the UAE and about the moves that they've been making. And I think it frames what's happening here better than almost anything else I've read. In that piece, he was talking about the OPEC announcement, the exit of OPEC. But he's really talking about something a whole lot bigger. He writes that the Abraham Accords, the normalization agreement with Israel, was not primarily a pragmatic calculation about economic opportunity or regional stability. In Dan's words, it was, quote, a civilizational statement that said that the UAE's primary reference community was no longer the Arab world and its accumulated grievances, its shared narratives of dispossession and resistance, its consensus that the Palestinian cause was the non-negotiable litmus test of Arab political identity. No, the normalization with Israel, says Dan, said that the UAE's reference community was the club of states that prioritize economic dynamism, technological innovation, security cooperation with the West, and the realistic management of the present over the romantic politics of historical and theological grievance. End quote from Dan. Great quote. In other words, the UAE was actually making a, as he calls it, a civilizational choice, an ideological choice to move away from the traditional Muslim and Arab grievance and theological animosity to the West and trying to move towards a brighter future of cooperation with the West. And then he writes this, and I want you to hear this line carefully. Israel was not an exception to be managed within Arab identity. It was a model to be emulated, a small, technologically sophisticated, militarily capable, economically dynamic state that had built extraordinary power from limited resources in a hostile neighborhood. Abu Dhabi looked at Tel Aviv and saw a mirror of its own aspirations. That is a stunning observation from Dan Bermawi. And I think it's correct. I think it explains everything that happened this week. Because here's what Iran understands. Iran, even if Western analysts don't get it. Iran is not attacking the UAE because of a border dispute or an oil rivalry. It's not about the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is attacking the UAE because the Islamic Republic knows exactly what the UAE has become. They're attacking what Dan calls, quote, the extension of Western civilization in the Arabian desert, an Arab Muslim state that has looked at Israel, looked at the West, and said, this is our future, not our past. Iran's entire founding ideology exists to destroy that choice. The Islamic Republic has defined itself for 45 years against exactly the civilizational choice that the UAE is now embracing. Modernity, openness, partnership with Israel, integration with Washington. When Iran fires missiles at Fujairah, they're not just targeting an oil terminal. They're targeting a statement. They're targeting a move that the UAE is making in a much broader sense. Now, let me explain why Fujairah specifically matters here. So let's take a look at the map and we'll see where Fujairah is. And I've talked about this before, but it bears repeating. Now, here's the Strait of Hormuz. Here's the United Arab Emirates, okay? Right, the tip here is part of Oman, and Oman's also under the line here. If we zoom in a little bit more, we can see it more clearly. Here's Fujairah. Fujairah is right here. And there is a pipeline that brings oil from the oil fields over here in the UAE, and it brings them all the way over to Fujairah and Corfacan, these two ports, and that way the oil can go out into the Gulf of Oman, into the Arabian Sea, etc. They can go, and they don't need the Strait of Hormuz. It's a bypass. They built the pipeline as a bypass of the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, so why is that significant right now? So the Iranians are trying to hit Fujairah because they want to prevent the UAE from being able to ship oil. And the IRGC is basically saying, hey, this is under our control. Your economy, the UAE, your economy needs our permission to function. That's kind of what they're saying here. And the UAE's answer, delivered basically on the same day as this, is that they signed this big defense contract to buy the C-390s. Now let's get to what those are. The C-390 Millennium is a modern jet. It's a modern airplane. It's a jet-powered military transport aircraft. It's huge. It's faster and more capable than anything currently in that role in the region. Okay, this is a transport aircraft. It can carry heavy cargo. It can carry armored vehicles. It can drop paratroopers. It can airdrop supplies to troops on the ground without landing. It converts into a flying hospital for mass casualty evacuation. And critically, it can operate from short, unpaved runways, remote airstrips, dispersed locations that aren't on Iran's target list. So in a conflict like this one, where the Iranians are targeting air bases, they're targeting the main air bases in the UAE, the ability to disperse quickly, with move equipment around quickly to locations that aren't pre-mapped is a very important strategic ability. And the UAE just purchased that ability, but there's more to it than that. The UAE negotiated for the maintenance and repair infrastructure, for those rights, to be built on Emirati soil, operated by an Emirati company. You see, the way it works with aircraft is that every few hundred hours in the air, they need to be maintained, and the maintenance is very significant. The planes basically have to be taken apart and rebuilt. And generally, if someone has, let's say, American aircraft, they usually would have to bring it all the way back to the United States. This isn't an American aircraft, it's Brazilian, but the Emiratis also negotiated that they would be able to build repair and maintenance infrastructure on Emirati soil, because the UAE is the first country in the Middle East to get these airplanes, and they want to become the natural hub for any other neighboring country, any other country in the region that later buys these airplanes. So they're not just purchasing the planes; they want to become the center of this defense, of this very important piece of equipment. They want to become what everyone else relies on. So they bought this from Brazil. That's also very significant. It's not from the United States. It's not European. It's Brazilian. So think about that. The UAE will now not be as dependent, or they're signaling that they're not going to be as dependent on a single patron like the United States. Usually, for most of the recent history, the UAE has gotten all of their equipment from the United States, and now they're basically showing that they're diversifying. They're not going to rely on the political goodwill of any one country. So if you put it all together, the OPEC exit signals that they want to be independent of influence of the Saudis, they want to be able to control their own destiny economically. Buying these Brazilian aircraft signals that they want to be more militarily independent and be more of a strategic leader in the region. And this is all happening the same week as they're getting attacked by the Iranians. Now let's come back to the Netanyahu phone call. I mentioned that it's the key to understanding everything, because I really think that what's significant here, as I said, is not that Netanyahu made the call, but it's that the UAE chose to publicize it. The old Arab political order had one absolute rule: whatever else you do, you don't publicly embrace Israel. The Palestinian cause was, as Dan writes, the non-negotiable litmus test of Arab political identity, right? Any Arab leader who broke the rule and normalized with Israel would pay for it politically, sometimes physically, sometimes with their lives. And the UAE normalized with Israel in 2020. That was already massive. But this week, while the Iranian missiles were landing on their territory, Netanyahu called, and the UAE told the world that he called. They put it in a press release. They listed him alongside the other world leaders who called to condemn the attacks. They made it official. They made it public. Okay, this is in the Arab world. This is actually much bigger than you think. It might sound like a small thing to you, but there's like this taboo about, even if you make peace with Israel, there's this taboo about counting them as a friend. And this is a big move by the UAE. Like, we don't care. We're going to tell everyone that Netanyahu called to offer his support. We're not embarrassed by the relationship with Israel. We're not managing it quietly. We're proud of it. And we want Iran, the Saudis, the Arab street. We want the entire world to see it clearly. See, the break with OPEC to make themselves more independent of these other Arab states, the other Muslim states, and now saying, yeah, Netanyahu called. It's not insignificant. These are big things. And the purchase of the C-390s from Brazil, like, hey, we're taking care of ourselves. We're increasing our capabilities across the region. Let's remember that the UAE also supports the separatist rebels in Yemen, who've been trying to fight the Houthis. They also support Somaliland against the Islamist Somalia. Right? The UAE has spent the last decade using its money and its military capacity to dismantle the Islamist political infrastructure across the region, in Yemen, in Somalia, in Sudan, in Europe. They treat political Islam in any institutional form as an enemy, as a civilizational enemy, rather than just, another expression of Muslim identity that is tolerated, which is the way the other Muslim states, even the ones that are generally considered moderate, treat it. The UAE has turned against it, right? There was that news story you might remember where the UAE decided that they're no longer giving funding to their college-age young people to study in the UK universities because they're worried about them getting radicalized by the Muslim Brotherhood. Meaning the UAE has been pretty consistent. They're anti-Islamist forces. And having these C-390s means that they can support the various groups, the various militias that they're supporting across the region who are the anti-Islamist militias, that they're going to be able to support them much better. That's what this type of aircraft does. It allows you to provide much more support in remote areas with equipment, with personnel, etc. So it's a very valuable piece of equipment for the UAE if they're trying to project power across the region. Now, Dan Bermawi also writes that OPEC was another institution that still had this old identity. And by leaving it, the UAE is saying that they're no longer part of that. Right? And it's, again, announcing the Netanyahu call. It's along the same lines. Here's the bottom line. What we're watching here is not a series of reactive moves by a small country under pressure. What the UAE is doing is deliberate and methodical. And what they're doing is an identity transformation. It's actually been underway slowly for years, but the Iran attacks, what's happened in this war, has accelerated this process. The UAE is basically saying, in every way that it knows how to say it, that we know what civilization we belong to. We know who our enemies are. We know who our partners are. And we are building right now with while the missiles are falling, the military, economic, and diplomatic architecture to defend that choice. Iran wants the UAE to feel the cost of what it has become and back down. The UAE is signing contracts, right? And it's moving forward with this. This is really, I hope you understand what I'm really putting forward here is that you take these moves. Again, let's just sum up. Iran's attacking. And the UAE leaves OPEC. We're no longer going to be controlled by other people's decision-making, right? This is all a move towards independence. And they look at Israel and they're proud of their relationship with Israel. And they see the U.S.-Israel relationship. They see the U.S. frustration with so-called allies who don't carry their own weight, who don't actually chip in. And they see how the United States is praising the Israelis for actually, fighting. And they want to become more independent too. They understand that that's the best way to be, that's actually the best guarantee of their future. Right? They also don't know where it's going to go with the U.S. and its relationships with Pakistan and relationship with Saudi Arabia and relationship with Turkey. The UAE is being very smart. And they're letting the world know we're not part of these cartels anymore. We're not part of this group of Gulf states that's all going to be governed as protectorates of the United States. No. They are making choices to assert themselves as a regional power. They're making choices to show that they're independent of this old-fashioned Arab way of thinking that is hamstrung by this need to virtue signal over the Palestinians, even though I say virtue signal because even like all these countries like Saudi Arabia that say, oh, Palestinian state, they don't want a Palestinian state. It would be the worst thing for them. But it's lip service that the UAE is saying we're not playing those games anymore. And I think that's huge. And I think it should be commended, and we should be rooting for them. And God bless them. God bless the UAE for what for everything that they're doing. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. That's what I wanted to share with you. I hope this made some sense. Please make sure to share this video and tell people about the channel. And please make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletters, Israel 365 Action, Israel 365 News. Go to Israel365action.com to learn more about what that is, what Israel 365 Action is. And you can stay abreast of all the important work that we're doing there. All right, God bless.